Okay, so first I want to thank you guys for being in attendance today. We will be sending out this presentation after to all of those in attendance, and we will also show you on the website where it's added. So if you need to refresh about any of the content we go over today, feel free. So let's get started. All right, so today these are the risk management training topics that we are going to discuss. There are 67 slides in here. Some of them are just transition slides. So I've got some notes that I wrote down, so I won't be reading slide for slide, but I just want to let you guys know since you guys will have this in your possession afterwards as well. Okay, so let's first talk about Clay's bill and the House Bill of 2639. So Clay Warren was a student at Texas Tech who tragically passed away in a car accident coming home from his fraternity event in 2002. And by 2007, Clay's bill, which is otherwise known as the House Bill 2639, came into effect. So it was because of what happened to Clay Warren that House Bill came into effect. So to go into a little more detail about it, the bill made it mandatory for risk management education to be presented to all of these student organizations, which requires officers and advisors to attend the training and requiring that the reporting of the training information is sent to all RSO members. So the first step is you guys being in the the presentation today. So you're an advisor, then the officers, there are 2 officer presentations going on Thursday and Friday. So that will meet that requirement. And then the last part is giving that information to your members. So we'll talk a little bit more about this. All right. And so let me go over this as well. So the goal is to make sure that everyone on campus knows there are some guidelines to follow before planning activities such as parties and trips, and just as important, to discourage hazing, boozing, and other illegal activities. And this was by Representative John Smithy. Obviously, some of these don't apply to our campus because we are a community college, but this is a bill in effect for all colleges. All right, so going into the risk management policy, risk management is a very important aspect of being involved in a registered student organization on campus, and it's requiring this information to help with planning and organizing of campus events that are hosted on campus or off campus. It is the RSO's responsibility to consider potential risk management risks with all meetings, events, and travel to ensure the safety and well-being of the students. So this is the Lone Star College policy. So this shows policy VID 105, which also can be found at the link on the website. So within the policy manual, RSOs are required to attend risk management training. So note that it does state that the representatives and officers of the RSO will provide an overview of the contents from this training at the next full membership meeting. So we do know that you guys are working boosting your membership back after COVID and all of the issues that have gone on with that, and also after your students are graduating. So however, you still need to present this information at your next full membership meeting. So that is up to you guys. Whatever meeting you feel is your next full membership meeting, that's when you will provide an overview of this information. So you can just highlight some of the big main points from the slideshow at that full membership meeting. And whatever day you do that, please email me the date that you presented the overview, so that way I can send this information to system office because they need to know this information as well. All right, so what is risk management? So risk management, as we'll discuss here in this presentation, is the process of considering potential risks to students and the college when planning events, monitoring the RSO's activities, and taking steps to minimize risk factors in any way possible. So it can be physical risks, mental risks, etc., and we'll get into those as well. So these are the types of risks that we identify through risk management: physical, reputation, emotional, financial, facilities. And so each of these talks about a different way that there's a risk involved with those categories. So you can read a little bit more about those later on as well. So we'll get into some of the main topics right now, starting with alcohol and drugs. So over time, I'm sure we've all heard different statistics involving alcohol and drugs. So I'm just going to highlight a few that I found very interesting. So over 1,825 students between the ages of 19 to 24 die annually from alcohol-related injuries. And another one that I thought was really cool, which is the last one, that in 2018, 67,367 drug overdose deaths have occurred in the United States. So those numbers are really high, and obviously the drug overdose death doesn't say between 19 and 24, but it is important to note that alcohol and drugs are a big deal, especially among younger students on campus. Okay, so drug and alcohol abuse. So there are major effects from drugs and alcohol abuse. One of the risks is you have a higher chance of developing an addiction, which can result in a drug overdose, whether that is accidental or intentional. So it's good to note that it could be on purpose that someone is trying to do a drug or alcohol overdose, but most of the time it's unintentional. Okay, so high-risk drinking. This is what we consider as high-risk drinking. It includes underage drinking, drinking and driving, and similar activities as those. When you're mixing medications and health conditions when drinking, so if you're mixing some type of medication you take all the time that you shouldn't be taking with alcohol or with other drugs, or if you have a health condition that prevents you from doing those types of similar things, as well as binge drinking. And as you can see, 5 drinks concurrently for men and 4 for women is what we consider to be binge drinking. Now this image I thought would be really interesting to show you guys. So this is an image of a standard drink, and it shows how the different alcohol stacks up against each other. So as you can see, as the percentage of alcohol in each drink gets higher, the volume gets lower. So you've got the 12 fluid ounces of regular beer, which have the lowest percentage of alcohol, and then you go all the way to a shot, which is way smaller than the beer, but has 40% alcohol content. And a lot of students don't really notice that when they're mixing drinks or when they're drinking different, like a big one right now is seltzers and stuff, and those have different alcohol percentages. So they just need to be aware of that. And I think this really sums up that whether you're drinking 12 fluid ounces of one thing or 1 fluid ounce of another thing, the percentage is what you're worried about as well. Okay, so here are some of the policies which relate to alcohol. So in the first one, LSC provides an alcohol and drug-free workplace and learning environment. And it's important to note that no group or individual will be permitted to serve or bring alcoholic beverages in or upon the facilities, which includes any RSO events. And obviously we haven't had any issues with that in the past, but it's just something to note because some of our students in these clubs are over 21, and sometimes when they're coming up with events ideas, they might think that alcohol would be something they could serve at an event, and we're a dry campus. So any violation of being a dry campus, of not being a dry campus, I should say, could result in disciplinary action. So we just need to be aware of that. All right. Providing alcohol to minors. This is a Class A misdemeanor, and it is punishable to a fine up to $4,000 and could include jail time. So this can affect your future employment as well as the minor's future employment in certain careers. So we advise that you do not provide alcohol to minors, and that students who are over 21 do not do the same either because of the consequences involved. Okay, so this is a little bit of information about DUIs and DWIs offenses. So Texas is a zero tolerance law state for minors driving with any alcohol in their system. And as you can see from the slide, there are multiple consequences for minors driving under the influence. In addition to that, though, any person driving while intoxicated in a public place will result in jail confinement. And as you can see, while intoxicated or while intoxicated with an open container has different degrees of the types of laws that are in place and also difference in the punishments. So it's just better to not be driving under the influence and to note that there's a zero tolerance for minors in general. Okay. So when medical assistance is needed, there's 911 Lifeline law. So in 2001, Texas passed this law, which states that if a person is under 21 but calls 911 for someone who has alcohol poisoning as a way to save their life, they will not be charged for possessing or consuming alcohol. So this only applies to the first person that calls for medical assistance. So if there's a group of 10 or 12 students that were drinking and one student needs assistance, only the first person that calls 911 is actually not going to be charged. The rest, it's really up to the discretion of the law officers. And it's important to note that they must remain at the scene, the person that performs that call, and they must cooperate with EMS and law enforcement in order for them to not be charged. So regardless of if they call, they can't just leave the scene. There are some other circumstances that they need to be in place with in order to not be charged in that situation. Okay, so symptoms and signs of alcohol overdose and poisoning. Some of these might be familiar to you if you've ever done risk management training before. So these are some of the common signs. Take a look at these, and that way you'll be able to detect if someone you know is exhibiting any of them. And these, like I said, have been shown before, so just getting familiar with the symptoms and signs of alcohol poisoning is important. So what to do if you overdose on alcohol? So this is a long slide, so I'm not going to read all of it to you. But if someone in your presence is overdosing on alcohol, immediately call 911. In addition, any of those following procedures on this slide will help while waiting for medical personnel to arrive. But make sure that you are not putting your own safety at risk when performing any of these procedures, because obviously we don't want you getting hurt in the process if you are helping someone who has overdosed from alcohol. Okay, so this I wanted to include, which is I think it's pronounced the Bacchus Maneuver, but this is one procedure that can be life-saving that I wanted to highlight that I learned from a previous presentation. So these are the 4 steps. You'll raise the arm that is closest to you above their head of the person who is suffering from alcohol poisoning or overdose, and prepare to roll them towards you. So you'll gently roll them towards you, guarding their head from hitting the floor. The head should rest in front of the arm, but not on it. Tilt the head up to maintain airway. Tuck their nearest hand under their cheek to help maintain head tilt, and raise the face off the floor, and then check on them often. This is to prevent them from choking on their own vomit and just keep their airways free so that they can breathe while help is on the way. Okay, so preventing alcohol overdose or poisoning. Obviously, one of the big things is not consuming alcohol. That's the best way to avoid any alcohol overdose or poisoning. However, taking any of the steps below on the screen will help to decrease the likelihood of an overdose or poisoning for yourself or those you love. So these could include knowing your limits, avoiding mixing different alcohol together, and using a designated driver while drinking. So now we're going to go on to drug use. So drug use and abuse can affect a person in many different ways, whether that is physical, emotional, and especially financial and reputational. So also please note that it is illegal to use, manufacture, own, sell, and or distribute any substances based on Texas Health and Safety Code. All right, so controlled substance drug possessions under Texas law. So those controlled dangerous substances include heroin, cocaine, meth, marijuana, manufactured narcotics, steroids, depressants, and stimulants. The possession of these can range in penalties from a misdemeanor to severe felony charges based on the determining factors highlighted on this slide. So this is for any of those controlled substances, the Texas law based on that. All right, so symptoms and signs of a drug overdose. So some common signs and symptoms are listed on the slide. Take a look at these so that you are able to detect if someone you know is exhibiting any of them. This is a longer list than those for the alcohol abuse or poisoning, but it's good to note that some of these are similar in cases. Okay. So what to do if you overdose on drugs or someone you know overdoses on drugs? Immediately call 911, just like if someone is overdosing or has alcohol poisoning. So in addition, any of the following procedures on the screen will be able to help you while medical personnel arrive. But again, make sure that you're not putting your own safety at risk when you're performing any of these procedures below. Okay, and then preventing a drug overdose. So obviously, as mentioned with alcohol, not using drugs is the best way to prevent an overdose. However, taking the steps below will decrease your likelihood of an overdose for yourself or those you love, which includes increasing awareness, which this presentation is a way of having students get more awareness of these symptoms and signs and what it does to your body, avoiding multiple substance use, and also seeking treatment if you need help. So next we're going to discuss hazing. So what is hazing? It's a ritual that involves risk, pain, or harm to gain some form of initiation. And it can involve alcohol consumption or ritualized pain endurance. Hazing has led to deaths on college campuses, which has led to anti-hazing laws in the United States. As we know, this does happen at bigger universities, and at times it is linked to fraternities and sororities with hazing because they go through an initiation process, but obviously all campuses may have some form of hazing that's similar to this. So, to continue with what is hazing, this just describes in detail what the term hazing includes. So to summarize what it talks about, it can include physical brutality and any physical activities that provides risks to mental or physical health of the student or the safety of the student. So that could be any of those types of things that involve hazing. Next, we're going to look at the LSC policy. So as of the spring 2020, so last spring, a report will be published on the LSC website that identifies any hazing incidents against an organization registered or recognized by the college. So the public report will contain information about who committed the hazing and who it was against, when it occurred, the date of the investigation, what violations were involved, and criminal charges filed, including any findings and sanctions imposed on the organization. So like I mentioned, this is as of this past spring, excuse me, and so these reports will be available on the website if any hazing does occur. Okay, so hazing policy definition. So LSC has policies which relate to hazing. Hazing as defined in these policies is any intentional, knowing, or reckless act against a student that endangers their mental health, physical health, or safety. Any RSO cannot require such acts for membership, whether on or off the college's property. So you, as an RSO, cannot mandate that any hazing occurs in order to become a member of an RSO. And all reports of hazing are treated as serious matters and should be reported to Student Life immediately if it occurs within your RSO. So to continue with those hazing laws, personal hazing offenses occur when a person engages in hazing or helps others to engage in hazing. So whether you are the person that's doing the hazing or you're a bystander in the incident. Personal hazing offenses do occur with that. And then organizational hazing offenses occur when an organization condones or encourages hazing or assists in hazing. So if your club is performing hazing or is allowing it to occur within your RSO, that would be under organizational hazing offenses. And this is just a continuation of the laws regarding the prosecution of an offense. So this states that the court may grant immunity from prosecution for the offense to those subpoenaed to testify for the prosecution and who does testify for the prosecution. So this just goes a little more in depth about that. And then to report hazing, please submit a written report to the Student Life Office. So this is a continuation of the laws, including the statement that a person consenting to a hazing activity is not a defense to prosecution. So hazing is never tolerated, whether it is consensual or not. And as mentioned on this screen, the penalty for failure to report hazing activities is a fine not to exceed $2,000 and or up to 180 days of confinement in jail. So even if you don't report it, there is a penalty involved with that. So it's best to report it immediately as it occurs. All right, so next we're going to move on to sexual misconduct, abuse, and harassment. So this is the LSC policies relating to misconduct. So the college covers this material in IXA11 policy, which is linked on the slide as well. And it is important to know that the college does not tolerate sexual misconduct or retaliation against anyone who complains about sexual misconduct. And here are some of the definitions as defined in IXA12. So some of the terms are listed here. The first being sexual harassment, which is divided into two different categories, which includes hostile work environment, sexual harassment, and quid pro quo. So hostile work environment harassment includes any verbal, physical, or visual forms of harassment that are sexual in nature, unwelcome, and creates a hostile work environment for the individual. So if you are at work, this is the type of harassment you will get if you are doing your job and any verbal, physical, or visual forms of harassment occur. Then quid pro quo refers to the form of harassment where a person of power stipulates that a greater performance will be based on whether the person submits to unwelcome sexual conduct. So that could occur when a person in power is stating that so maybe it would be, in this case, an officer of a club saying that they would not get membership into the club unless they do X, Y, and Z things. So that would be an example of a quid pro quo. And here we have some more definitions. So sexual assault is one of them. It includes rape, fondling, incest, or statutory rape. Sexual discrimination includes any discrimination on the basis of sex. And sexual violence is any physical sexual act without a person's consent. On this slide, some more terms and definitions. Consent is a voluntary and positive agreement between those engaging in sexual activity. Stalking includes any repeated or unwanted attention, harassment, or conduct where a person fears for their safety or the safety of others. And then Title IX harassment includes sexual harassment, sexual discrimination, and sexual violence. To read the full section on sexual misconduct, you can visit the link on this slide below, and that is directly linking to the policy. So when confronted with sexual misconduct, here are the different steps involved. First, you'll report to the police. You'll submit first-hand written documentation. Then you'll want to seek a network of support or professional counseling. They can go hand in hand. Utilize campus resources and advocates, and implement protective or restraining orders. And here is a list of resources for complaints. This includes internal, such as the police department on campus, the Office of Emergency Management, our Title IX coordinator, Karen Miner, It also includes external resources for complaints, so Family Time Crisis Counseling Center, Domestic Violence Hotline, Sexual Assault Hotline, the Montgomery County Women's Shelter, Northwest Assistance Ministries, Ben Taub Hospital, the MHMR Authority of Harris County, Houston Police Department Mental Health Unit, and Tri-County MHMR Services. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to be sending this PowerPoint out. So once this goes out, you can find any of these resources and send them to your students if you do need them as well. All right, so we're going to move on to discussing fire safety, weapons, and other campus safety information. So first, we're going to talk briefly about fire safety. So here are some safety tips: always having a plan. A fire alarm equals evacuate the building immediately. And I know our students sometimes, even in drills, they don't want to evacuate immediately when they hear that, but that's what a fire alarm is for. Help others if necessary or possible. Have a meeting place. Call in the exact location of the fire, so calling 911 and alerting them to where the fire is if you know where it is. And then also it's important to sign up for the LSC text and email alerts in the My Lone Star portal. And this will be a way for you to directly get those updates on any fire that occurs and the evacuation information. All right, so here we're discussing the LSC policies as it relates to the definition of prohibited weapons. So for full definitions, please see the link that takes you to the website where the policy is, and that's included on that link where it says VIE 102. And so these are prohibited weapons that are included in that policy. And as far as campus carry, Lone Star College has designated certain rules and regulations regarding gun-free zones. So the designation of these zones can only be approved by the chancellor. As of 2017, an LTC holder may carry their firearms into campus buildings unless it is an exclusion zone, which will be clearly marked. So yes, you can carry on campus, but there are gun-free zones on campus. So you and your RSOs should be aware if you are carrying on campus those zones that they are prohibited in. All right, and in case of emergency, so there are posters displayed all around campus about information for what to do in any of the following emergencies, including fires, suspicious persons, bomb threats, explosions, hazardous materials, medical alerts, severe weather, power failure, and campus warnings. So it is very helpful to review the information regarding these scenarios, especially after the scenario that occurred last fall with our lockdown on campus, or excuse me, in the spring. With COVID, it seems like it was much further away. But that is another reason why it's important to review the safety procedures and information in case of those emergencies. But it's also important to save the phone number for campus police that's listed on the bottom. So if you're calling from a campus phone, it's going to be 5911. But if you're calling from your cell phone or an external phone, you'll use the 281-290-5911, and that's important to have in your phone at all times. But this slide, it just is a reminder of what occurred on our campus and that you can never be too prepared for those things. All right, so now we're going to talk about issues and accommodations for disabilities. So regarding that, Section 504 prohibits the discrimination against people with disabilities and works with ADA and IDEA, to protect children and adults with disabilities from exclusion or unequal treatment. So student organizations do not discriminate against persons with disabilities. All are welcome to participate. And if you or any students that you do know that are members or want to be members that need accommodations to participate in any RSO activities, you'll want to refer them to the Disability Services Office, which is located inside of the Career Services Office. So let's say you have an event on campus and you need an interpreter. or you have an event on campus that might not be accessible to a student in a wheelchair, that's something you'll want to discuss with the Disability Services Office to make sure that you can accommodate any members or students that might attend those events. And along with that, this policy on the slide, which is VID 11, Students with Disability Rights, is related to the rights for students on campus that have disabilities. So the college believes in equal access to educational opportunities and has committed to making reasonable accommodations for qualified individuals with disabilities. Along with that, VID 1102, students are responsible for identifying themselves as individuals requesting accommodations for a qualified disability. So Leanne, she's our disability services counselor at the Kingwood campus. Like I said, she's located, her office is inside of the career services building, career services office in the SSC Conference Center. So if you are a student you know needs accommodations, her contact information is below and she'll be the best person to accommodate those requests for our campus in particular. All right, so next is student travel policy and procedures. So we're going to just briefly touch on these because, as mentioned in the RSO town hall, we had this May, I believe. There will be no traveling prohibited for the fall and spring semesters currently. So you'll just want this information for traveling in the future. And this information is pretty familiar to you guys if you've attended a training. And actually, the day of the lockdown on campus, I hosted a travel workshop. So I was actually coming back when we got the alert to shelter in place. So if you were at that training beforehand, I don't know if you remember much of it, but here is a little bit of information regarding student travel policies. All right, so to touch on non-academic student travel, that is what your RSO would be doing. So this can include an organization participating in conventions, workshops, athletic events or competitions, or non-athletic events and competitions. Modes of transportation may vary from airplanes, if you have to go to a faraway conference, college-owned or leased cars or vans, commercially owned and operated buses or vans, and personal vehicles. And travel that requires paperwork must meet the following conditions. So please note that there may be travel that does not meet all of these conditions, but student life may still require paperwork. And I know from that presentation that I was talking about before the lockdown, we were actually in the process of getting more clarification on these because one of the things it talked about is the 25 miles from the closest LSC campus or center, which makes it sound like if you're at least 25 miles, if you're not 25 miles farther than any of the campuses, that it's not considered non-academic student travel with paperwork. So I never did get a clarification on that, but these are what the policies currently state, just so you guys know. Okay, so the list of documents below includes what must be submitted to the Office of Student Life for travel. You can find the forms on the website at the link provided down here, the RSO resources page. That's where you'll find this presentation too if you need it in the future, but also that is where all of these documents can be found or links to where they are on the website. So just to note, the LSC sponsored student travel and trip plan and the travel roster, those all go together. Usually it's the TR1 and 2. Release and indemnification agreement is completed by the students. That's the TR3. Student travel waiver and hold harmless agreement if transportation is not provided by the college, or excuse me, that would be the TR3. And then approval of college-sponsored student travel, which will be signed by the student life. So those are the paperwork involved with student life and involved with RSO travel, but most of you are familiar with that, so that's why we're just briefly touching on it. Okay, along with that, occasionally students will use student-owned vehicles for travel. In these cases, the following list applies. So a lot of students will meet at a event. So if they're going off campus to the zoo or something, sometimes they'll take their own vehicles. And this is the information regarding student provided transportation. But other times, the college will provide transportation. So with that, a driver that transports students must be a college employee that is approved. There's an approval process that occurs. You must have a valid driver's license and have a satisfactory driving record. And there are also some driver responsibilities listed on this slide too. Sorry if you can hear some noise, my cat's over there. So occasionally, in summary, you can view the student travel policy on the website. It's listed with that link on the current slide. But it is important to remember that planning ahead is the key when it comes to student travel, knowing all the necessary paperwork and stuff. So if you do have any additional questions about travel in the future, when we are traveling and when our RSO is traveling, please reach out to myself or another full-time staff member from Student Life, and we can assist you further with those questions. All right, and then this piece is about RSO events. It's just one slide, but I just wanted to include it as well. So when hosting events that will require the use of funds, please make sure to complete the RSO fund request form for approval, which most of you are familiar with. I've combined the old request form with the promotional product request form, so they're both on one. So basically, anytime that you're using funds for an event, you'll be filling that out for approval prior. Sometimes your students will do that, your members or officers, without your consent, and you have no clue that they've already submitted it. So that's why it's important that you guys are in the know of all those things that the students are doing. And all LSC policies for student organization events apply whether held on campus or off campus. And it is important to consider all potential risks and work to minimize them for all participating in the events. So whether you're on or off campus, all of these risks and policies apply. And lastly, I know we're kind of getting tired of talking about COVID-19 and the coronavirus, but I did just want to include a little bit of information on this for just kind of our risk management purposes. So this is just a list of the known symptoms. As we know, they can be different in different people and it affects people in different ways, but these are the main symptoms that have been known and have been recognized on this website for the CDC. And then within 2 to 14 days, usually, of exposure to the virus is when you'll experience some of these symptoms. So what to do if you're sick? Obviously, the first would be stay home, unless you're going to receive medical care. But also you'll want to get lots of rest, stay hydrated, wash your hands frequently, and also frequently use surfaces you'll want to wash as well. And then COVID-19 prevention. So obviously the biggest prevention is to stay home, wear a mask like we're doing on campus, but there's other important ways listed on the slide, which is kind of the same with what to do if you're sick, you know, with using hand sanitizer, covering your cough and sneezes, cleaning and disinfecting frequently touched surfaces, and so forth. But like I said, you're pretty familiar with these, I'm sure, given our circumstances, but I just wanted to touch on those briefly as well. All right, so next I'm going to open it up to questions. So I'm going to take a look and see if there are any. Feel free to ask any questions, even if it doesn't relate to specifically to something we're covering. I'm in the chat. And obviously, this is the first risk management training for advisors. So if you have a co-advisor that is not in this training, or any advisors you know of other clubs that didn't attend this training, tomorrow the training will be from 12:30 to 1:20. I don't see any questions popping up. If anything comes up, though, let me see. I'm going to move to the next slide, but if anything comes up, feel free to ask any questions you may have. So now comes your last task regarding risk management training. So now that you've completed the training, you will use the link below to complete the risk management training quiz. And let me, I think I can, excuse me, let me exit this way. I'm going to copy this and put this into the chat. So that way you guys can access it. And then let me go back in. Perfect. Oh, almost perfect. I did it from the wrong slide. So, as I mentioned, usually you do a quiz after you've done the training. So this is the same quiz, it's just been updated. So it does have 12 questions which cover information that was already covered in this training. So this must be completed by September 1st by all officers and advisors of your RSO in order to use your funds. So as I mentioned, it would be best for you to complete it right now after this presentation, just so you have it completed. And since the information, sorry, my cat's trying to get in the screen. Since the information is fresh in your mind right now. And like I said, September 1st is the deadline. This is also the September 1st deadline is also for all required information from your RSO. So the RSO registration form, your officer representative form, the risk management training. The RSO form is where you'll send your constitution and members roster. Those all are to be completed by the September 1st date. And I still don't see any questions. So let me go to this screen. So this is my contact information. So if you do have any questions in the future, feel free to ask them. I know that you guys have been asking questions and emailing me throughout the time that we've been off campus, which is awesome. So if you do have additional questions about this training or something we talked about in this training that you just kind of wanted to discuss a little bit further, feel free to email me or call me. I do check my email very frequently throughout the day. I always have my email up. So that would be the best way to contact me, but I'll get my phone calls as well. They go straight to my email. So thank you guys for joining the presentation today. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and don't forget to do your quiz as well. Have a good day, guys. And thank you, Debbie and Rosalie and Leah. I appreciate all of your help. Okay, then we'll stop the recording. And Chris, yes, I'll send the slide out right now.